Robyn Caruso. So I happen to be a clinical faculty in the CTO. Um, and I also an LMFT. So I'm excited to talk to you today just about different career paths and sort of just plant some seeds, hear what thoughts you all have, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation after we do this. So, here's what we'll talk about. So, we're going to cover lots of different areas. So, this is going to be sort of like a survey of a lot of random things. Um, we could go into a deep dive on some of them in the Q&A, or if there's a request to go into more of a deep dive, like workshop on one particular area, you can feel free to give me your feedback and we could create something for that. So what we'll cover today is I'm going to show you like my path. Some colleagues have generously shared their resumes and they are happy to have their names on it too. So you'll be able to see people with different career paths and sort of like the different steps that they took or the different roles that they held along the way. We'll talk about like getting started, some of the self-awareness pieces, what exists in terms of what's out there. And then there's a part of this that's about networking and connecting with other professionals. And there is an introverted and extroverted option. So there's lots of options for what what people can do, and there's not a right or wrong way. It's just whatever works for you. So um, okay, so we'll start out with just so that this is sort of like the informed consent, so you know who you're talking to, and also taking with a grain of salt, like if you have different goals and dreams for yourself, that taking what you can from me and then contextualizing it with like my experiences through this lens, and then of course through all the identities and other experiences in my life that I hold. So, so I figured if I'm talking about career path, I should share mine so that you can kind of pick and choose what parts of it resonate for you. So I have sort of a like how I experience what feels sort of kind of like I don't want to say backwards, but like a different route to becoming clinical. So I started out, I did my training at Valley Community Clinic. I actually graduated from Antioch in 2009. So I was there like 2008, 2009, really amazing training, psychodynamic. I worked in the eating disorder treatment center, could not apply the psychodynamic in treatment. Like I was like, I had to learn other skills, but the training it was great. I'm thrilled that I had it and it didn't work for what I wanted to do. So the very short version of this is like the overview is I started more in administrative, like I had some clinical roles to start, and then I got very, very administrative in some of the roles that I had at various treatment centers, lots of program development, lots of just like crisis intervention with clients, and not as much one-to-one time with clients in the earlier days. Like I did groups and things like that, but it didn't have a caseload for any extended period of time in the earlier part of my career, which was sort of an interesting path. Like I could conceptualize, I could supervise people, but I now that I have a caseload and I supervise people, it's a very different experience, not being disconnected. So we can talk about that later if anyone has questions. And now I started my own treatment center. So I now have a PHP IOP for eating disorders. And then in addition to consulting, having a caseload and just like everything that I love. So there was sort of like a path to get there. And all the learning and everything along the way, every single job I had has impacted me now. I personally fully advocate for starting at higher levels of care. Me as an outpatient therapist, how I show up would not be the same if I did not work in residential detox, PHP, IOP for primary mental health, eating disorders, substance use disorders, because there's so much intersection of like, if you work with one population, you're going to get grief. You're going to get like people who like postpartum, you're going to get OCD, you're going to get an eating disorder because of the world in which we live. Like you're going to see all the things. You don't have to specialize, but you want to know what you're looking for. So having exposure to different populations is really helpful. And then Sandrine, I don't know if your hand is up for me, but I'll do questions at the end because I will get sidetracked and then we will never
Okay.
get through everything. So if that's okay with you, but you'll be the first one on the list. And so then also now because of the experience, I can do like forensic consulting. I've done very little of that, but that's where you can be like an expert witness for things related to the areas in which you are like you specialize or you are informed enough that you could qualify for that. I also there's a certification for eating disorders, so I do consultation for that so other people can get the certification. I used to do compliance consulting for treatment centers, but I don't love it, so I don't want to do that anymore. And then I love teaching, so I do that. So that's sort of like the overview for me. I'm going to show you now. Let me stop sharing this because I want to show you some other paths. So, okay, so I have, oh, you can't see it because I have to stop sharing the screen. Sorry, just give me 1 minute here to figure out what I'm doing with my screen share. There we go. Okay, so I'm trying to find this other window. Sorry, y'all. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Okay, so I have 3 resumes. So I want to show you other colleagues who have shared their resumes with us. So can everyone see Jasmine's resume on the screen right now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So Jasmine, actually, you might know her if anyone's on Facebook. Jasmine founded Mental Health Care Careers, and she has a Facebook group where people can come and share job postings. And she has like a website. So she started a whole like business or like program around this. She also has a private practice, and she specializes in, I think, like children. It's called Sandbox, I think. So if we look at her path, we'll just kind of go through this, but we can see there's different, volunteer, which is really great to do because you end up through volunteer work in different associations, you actually you learn, you network, and it's meaningful. We can see her certifications that prepare her for the work that she does, the different trainings that she's had. Um, I'll just kind of scroll through this, but you can see the jobs, where she started with teacher, like related work, right? And then when she got licensed, she has some administrative work, research assistant on here. She worked with DMH, which is really amazing documentation and just like I would say that these kinds of jobs, like working for the county, what I said about working in higher levels of care is the equivalent of that path. So having that is really solid on her end. Lots of experience with like children. You can see just like exposure in different ways, awareness of the resources. Um, and this is all in the folder I'm going to share with you, but we can see like the path for her clinical training under other people, starting her private practice about, like a little over 10 years ago. And then now that she owns her own Sandbox Family Therapist, Family Services in Pasadena, and they take insurance. And so she has built this whole thing, which you can see takes multiple skill sets in addition to the clinical. So there's that. This is Charity Wabuk, who is one of my colleagues. I used to work at Kaiser, so this is her resume. So Charity, LMFT, started out as Phoenix House. We can see that she had some upward trajectory in the original site that she was at. DMH also. And then she's also an instructor. Kaiser is good experience, good benefits if anyone's interested in that. And now she has a private practice and she's expanded more since she started, or since she sent me her resume, because I know that she does more than this now, but she is an instructor at another university and also private practice. And I think she does some speaking, more speaking than this. And then finally, Amy's resume, you're going to get to see this, but Amy does a lot of forensic consulting. So I don't know where it is. She's an RD/LMFT, so she can be in either role, but not both at the same time because of the dual relationship situation. But hers is a CV because with her forensic consulting, they want everything that you've ever done. So you can see here, like everything she's ever done that where she's qualified. So everything here, right? So we take a look at that. And so I will share a folder with all of this when we are done. So I'm going to go back to the slides there. And so, yes, so any questions? I know I'm showing you a lot with career paths right now. So if there's questions, just please write them down because we're going to go all over the place before we come back to that. Okay, but that's a fun place. So that's where you get to see where, there's so many more possibilities than that, but those are some of the paths that people take. So you can see that career shifts, like where you start and where you end up, there's nothing that's like linear about that. If we asked any of those people, including myself, none of that was planned. It sort of just things can sometimes just declare themselves. And if for me, if I was like when I trained at Valley, this is what I'm going to do, I would have missed out on so much and I would be so sad knowing what I could have, like what actually happened versus what I would have tried to control. So your first job is foundational. Everything that you do has meaning and you can build on it. You also don't need an MBA to be a leader. I will say, like, whoever I supervise early on, like as a manager, I'm sorry to them, and I've learned a lot since then. So having some coaching or other support, so learning those skills that we don't learn in our program is helpful, but we don't need an MBA. And then the most important thing is never stop learning. So never stop going to things like trainings that you're interested in. Don't do if you like there's CEs that you can get, like could check the box and just like read something and take a test and be done. I highly recommend not doing that. Like train on things that you're excited about. It'll make you a better clinician. You will stay excited, inspired. That's going to show up in your work. And then self-reflection and your own personal work. Like I think that if we're going to be therapists, like never stopping our own personal work because we can only go so far with people as we can go ourselves. Okay, so I know a lot of people have thoughts about starting in private practice. I am going to just be transparent that I would um, recommend not doing that because I think you miss out on a lot of learning. One of the reasons that I don't have on here, do I have it on here? Is that one of the biggest pros is if you work in a team setting where multiple people are seeing the same human, you're going to learn things that you would never learn if you're reporting to your supervisor what it feels like for you to be across from that human. If other people, not just like watching on a video, but are sitting and interacting with the person, like there's so much more learning if we all have an experience at that of the same person and we're talking about it in a clinical meeting. So you can have in private practice, you can have good supervision and mentoring. Um, you can start in private practice. That's great. You can learn marketing. Like there's different people who have different skill sets where you can learn from them. But I think that there's something at higher levels of care that if you start in a like private pay, private practice or insurance where it's the same thing all the time without some level of or exposure to some higher level of acuity, I think it's something that is a benefit to have that. If you can tolerate that, that's another piece. So don't override that if that's not you. So the cons are, I think I have the first bullet point I already said, but the higher levels of care, seeing people in higher levels of care, knowing what that looks like. When you have a client who you're trying to figure out what level of care is appropriate for this person, knowing what the options are is really helpful. So if you have someone in private practice and you're not sure, should it be IOP, should it be residential? You'll know because if you work in those levels of care, you have more of a sense of what that looks like. Um, and then also seeing like all the co-occurring that can happen. Uh, and then developing your own nervous system, which is, I think, the most important thing that we can do in our work is way more important than developing our brain. So I think I've said a lot of this. I'm not going to repeat some of this, but everything, like I said, just like everything along the way, good, positive, negative, hard, easy, all of it's important. You also, if you're going to be in private practice ever, you will have to have business skills. It's expensive to hire people. And when you work for yourself, either you do it yourself or you pay someone. So knowing how to like create a budget, things like that, if you're going to work in private practice for yourself, knowing some of those things or having some of those skills or a way to navigate that in a way that you can actually sustain your business is important. So you might change your long-term goals. You might fall in love with something that you never thought you would because you were open to possibility. So keeping in mind the idea of like, what can I learn? What are my interests? what is it about this that's interesting to me? Like really getting to know yourself so you can understand what you're drawn to and why. Um, and then also in different work settings, like we saw in some of the resumes we were looking at, people create opportunities. Like you get promoted, you get different opportunities if you show up professionally. And the more that you learn, like the more that um, like increase your learning for yourself because it's interesting and meaningful to you, but you also then increase your value. And then that can be reflected in the compensation and experience. I know a lot of times students are like, oh, I don't want to only make this when I graduate. And it's like, well, as a supervisor, like thinking, of myself, if I have to train you and I have to spend more time paying you for every hour I train you plus the supervision, I'm not paying you. Like, why would I do that? Right? Like, it doesn't make sense. So there's sort of like a trade-off of what that looks like. And I mean, certainly don't think that people should exploit new clinicians, but I also think that there are actual like real limitations for some of what is wanted compensation wise and what is possible based on what it costs. So the more that you build your own value, by learning and by taking opportunities or taking risks that are appropriate, then you can end up being worth whatever the job, like qualified for the job or worth the salary that you're asking for. So let's talk about what's out there. There's so many opportunities. And so my suggestion is if you start in private practice, fine, but like bounce around and have different settings so that you can have these experiences that I'm talking about. So, so you can start out like in a private practice. There's practices of one person. Obviously, you're not going to do that right away because you wouldn't be able to as an associate. If you join a practice, it's probably going to be a group practice. It might be insurance based, it might be private pay. There's all these apps for digital therapy. I'm not talking about AI, but like actual apps where I think therapists somehow get involved. I'm not as familiar, but I do know that they exist. I know Kaiser was using one as like a trial at one point. Working in like an inpatient psych, like Exodus, one of our training sites is that. Some of you might be there. Kaiser has hospital, like there's social workers in hospitals. Sometimes they let MFTs or PCCs have those jobs. There's corporate programs. There's, like I said, treatment center, government agencies that, this DMH would probably fall under there. You could work in like just different detention centers, or this over here, sorry, DMH over here, but community mental health is a good one. Sometimes there's settings where you like drive to different people's houses, which I know like safety and there's all that and things to consider, but seeing someone in their own environment can be amazing for exposure work. I know a lot of you already have training in school, so that's also, I think, valuable. Some of you, I know Sean, teacher, right? So, and now maybe into school, I think maybe. Um, but yeah, so lots of different options. I know people who work in like a primary care clinic where there's like different disciplines and they're the mental health person in a team with like doctors and like other people on the team. So there's a lot of different options, a lot of different settings. And then within all these settings, there's a lot of populations as well. So this is just like a little overview. If you wanted to work in an administrative capacity, this is a lot of what I did in the beginning. Not necessarily this, but a lot of the learning that helps support the clinical work. So working in like training, like putting together trainings, you have to learn if you're going to do that. Admissions departments, like a lot of treatment centers have an admissions department, and if it's a clinician, it actually the more I learned about that, the more it's like, yes, like it should be someone who understands clinical who's doing those jobs. There's, advocacy work. There's so much with mental health, on the policy level that, the more of us that can be involved, the better. A lot of actual students, not a lot, but like some students have these marketing and outreach jobs. I actually know a lot of marketing and outreach professionals who work for treatment centers because it gives them the flexibility to decide when they're having their meetings and the other things that they do, but then also go to their classes. So that's something that helps build your network and helps, you know, present the services of whatever the program is to the world. Utilization review, working with insurance. I know a lot, like more on the PhD level, but research quality improvement is like the compliance piece. So that's good to know. Because even if you don't do that, we want to be aware of what the laws are and what the regulations are, or the standards are for the work that we're doing. And then there's all the leadership roles where you could be both in a clinical role and a leadership administrative at the same time. And figuring out how to blend that is a dance for another day. But there's that. And then of course consulting, which is I started doing that while I had a full-time job. So there's, I think since COVID, there's a lot of more flexibility of people having like their side gig and then their full-time job. Maybe it's always been that way, but it seems like more people did it then. So we'll talk about like the specialization. I know a lot of students I've heard say, I want to specialize in certain things, and I think that's great. And something I didn't say is I started out with eating disorders for 7 or 8 years. I actually became better at treating eating disorders when I stopped working primarily with eating disorders. So when I started working with mental health and substance use disorders, and I learned more about, and I wasn't just looking for the eating disorder, I became better. So if you want to specialize, great. But if you only make that the population, you might miss other things that that population is presenting with. So that's what the paradox part is. So spoiler alert on that. So specializing can be helpful because you can get really good at working with people who like there's a certain specific pain that they have. If it can also feel more fulfilling. This enjoyment performance methodology is from this, what was it called? Like one of those, like those, oh, whatever, I forgot what it's called, like an inventory thing that you take to figure out like what you're good at or if you're a match for a certain career or job or whatever. So this is the idea that we do things, if we enjoy something, we're going to do it more. Um, and then if we do it more, we get better at it. So there's sort of like a repeating thing. Like if we're gonna do what we enjoy and we're gonna be better at it than things we don't enjoy. So I have learned I hate accounting. And I used to do it because I somehow thought that I was supposed to and I was better at it, but I don't like it and I don't do it as much and I'm not as good at it anymore. And I that's fine. So there's a way that we reinforce the things that we're good at. Um, so also some populations or modalities, like there might be um, more demand. And a lot of times for certain things, people want to know that you understand their issue, like whatever it is, and they would prefer to work with someone who has a lot of experience with that. Stepping down from higher level of care, they want to refer to people who actually specialize in the things, so the specialization can be helpful there. You also then can do like if you want to balance your level of burnout, like having a consultation group where people pay you to come to a group that they present cases and you give them your thoughts. There's things that you can do if you specialize. Or also you might see like different like camp, how they have different presenters and things like that. You can present, you can get paid for that, or you just do it as a service and then you kind of establish like this is what I do. And so send people so I can help them. And then not taking the people that maybe you aren't as trained to help. So, and that can also help with client outcomes, and then also building a network within other people who specialize or who like different, like for example, like eating disorders. So, eating disorder dietitians, I need to know who those are so I can refer to them. They can refer to me. We figure out like for this specific type of eating disorder, this is maybe the go-to, or this person who's an athlete and has, bulimia, maybe they'd be a fit over here. So really knowing like really even just like beyond just the specific diagnosis, but like any other details about the present, like the person or other things. So here's just something that I think is important to keep in mind. So I know that you have specializations, some of you at Antioch. Ethically, please don't say you specialize. Okay. When you graduate with your specialization, you don't actually specialize. Because if we look at what the ethics are, specialization is a combination of education, training, like consultation, it's experience. So I have feelings like, and I give my feedback to people when I see certifications that are a training, it's like wonderful. That's a training. Call it a training. It is not a certification because a certification or which is could be linked to a specialization in the future is that you have worked extensively with the population. You have focused on it. This is like the thing that you do, and you have lots and lots and lots of supervision around it before you go out on your own. And that's really like what the ethics are. So being really mindful that we don't say that. We can say, I focus on this. Great. But like I wouldn't say I specialize in anything other than eating disorders. I mean, maybe I'm getting closer to trauma, but it's like because now it's like over and over and over with lots of consultation with other people on it. But it's like that has a meaning that is very different than what people say. So looking at what this is, just I think that's important. So this is for MFTs. So see how it says education, training, and experience that meets recognized professional standards is practice in the specialty area. So years and years. Okay. So PCC. So it's same idea here. So really making sure that there's enough. I mean, they're kind of not exactly the same, but the qualifications, right? So one training does not make someone qualified. Just sitting in a classroom, no offense, it's great. It's foundation, wonderful, keep it up. But it's really like working with the population, hopefully making mistakes that aren't harmful, but like learning and then figuring out how do I do this better? How do I help more? What leads to better outcomes for clients? So that's really what we're talking about here. So it is in depth. It requires lots of formal training, supervision. Like I mean, it says expertise. I don't think anyone can really be because that's kind of centers the clinician instead of the client. And so like, who are we to be experts on anyone else? That's what I think. And just like really being highly competent in that area, like that we're saying we specialize in. So if there's a certification, if there's formal training, we want to make sure we do that. Really not missing out on that supervised piece. That's so important, even as a licensed person. Like I get supervision for psychodrama, and I will forever get supervision for psychodrama just because if I don't, there is so much harm that I could cause, especially with somatic work. So always get supervision if you do somatic work. So it's not what I was saying before. So not using a term like something to market yourself, saying I specialize in children and because I worked with children for a year. So I've said some of this, so I won't repeat about the overlapping, but I think there's certain things that would be good for anyone to take some training in. So like substance use, grief, eating disorders, OCD, um, issues, people with a uterus, like there's menopause, there's other like there's different things there. There's things with just like different hormones for all genders, like just knowing stages of life, things like that. Those are important just to be aware of. So when people show up, we're not thinking that it's attributed to something when they could go to a doctor and get, like we want to refer when appropriate, but um, there's different things that might be contributing to what people are coming with. I think just like to reiterate the exploring different populations, even if you know you want to specialize in a certain population, um, that would be important to do for the reasons I've already said. And so you can also explore specialization, but have, other populations that you work with if you want to, keeping a generalist skill set and taking different trainings that are interesting to you. Also working with different supervisors. So we can get a lot from certain people, but it's like you're developing yourself, and who you are is not going to be who any of your supervisors are, right? Like there might be some things that you're emulating and that you're borrowing from their style, but there might be some things that don't fit, and that's okay. And so seeing it done in a couple different ways helps you figure out, okay, what resonates for me. And I think that's also something that's really important. So modality. So there's an extensive list here. Um, as you can see, and there's way more than on here. So I'm curious when we have our discussion if there's things that people think should be added here. But there's so many different modalities that one can train in and use. For me, I am trained in accelerated resolution therapy here. I'm training in psychodrama. And I also incorporate internal family systems and DBT, and I think those are most of it. There might be things I'm forgetting. So having your like home base and then having the different things that you can pull from if you want, unless you specifically work from like a one modality, but it can be really helpful to have more than one, but finding what resonates for you, where they don't conflict like philosophically with each other. So I have a lot like the ones that I have, like they all align for me philosophically. I just lost connection. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again. All right. So I forgot where we were. Here we go. So yeah, so there's some of these people gets requested a lot for OCD, ERP. Oh my gosh, my others, I would say, at least like in the general Facebook forums that I'm a part of, that's what I see. So population, you can also, realize in just you can see like there's identity, there's diagnosis, there's specific issue. I'll put this in the chat when I'm done. So if people, when we have the discussion, want to talk more about this, we can. But people specialize in like religious trauma, for example. There's a lot about ADHD. DID is one that we see less, but that goes along with trauma quite frequently. OCD, you know, with trauma, a lot of times it's specific types of trauma that people would say or would specialize in because it's so diverse. So we're going to go out of that part of it now and into the getting started. Like, how do you, if you have ideas of what and how to like maybe start to collect ideas and inspiration now, there's some things that you actually can do now in terms of networking. So here's something that I think is helpful just as a self-assessment. This actually came from Dr. Laird, who used to be our director of clinical training up until winter. So just thinking about how well do you receive feedback? I say this a lot in my classes. I try to practice receiving feedback. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes it's like the feedback, I'm like, yeah, I know, like that's true. I can take that in. And sometimes it's surprising, or sometimes I'm like, hey, what is that? But like, I still try to take it in. But I think like the reason why this is so important is because with clients, we want the space to be theirs, and whatever's coming up, if we can hear it and take what's about us and process it wherever we need to, but not have it become about us in a way that's not helpful in the room. So the more we practice taking feedback, the more we self-reflect, the more we will build that tolerance of being able to do that. Thinking about like common denominator here, what are the relationships that we have with, this is the way I ask this question in an interview, is instead of telling me your strengths and weaknesses, it's what would your supervisors, what have they said to you about you with clients, about you as an employee, about you as a supervisee? Like I'll ask it in that way because I want to know what are the themes, like what are people saying about you? Not because anyone's perfect, but because do you know where people have positive feedback? Do you know where the struggles are? So these questions are good to, I think, reflect on. We all have things that show up that we don't even realize. Like there's things that like 10 years later, I realize about myself that people have been saying, but it hasn't clicked what they mean. And I'm like, oh, that's what they mean. And so I imagine people have, maybe similar experience. But yeah, so looking at it, maybe just like reflecting on some of these things, because there are certain settings that are a match for different answers to these questions. So am I comfortable with high acuity clients? If you're not, and if your nervous system gets overwhelmed, forget everything I said about higher level of care. Either if you want to work there, take care of yourself and figure out how to be able to be in the space, or don't do it at all, because it's not going to be helpful if it's too much, right? So really thinking about who you are and what works for you. tolerance of ambiguity, right? Like sometimes therapy we do not have clarity on so many things. And so that's important, especially with the roles that we're in, which require a lot of self-directedness. So thinking about how do I build that muscle? So yeah, so some of the strengths that we can pull them out of themes and relationships, and there's areas where we can always learn and grow if we want to or not, depending on what we want for ourselves, what we're willing to do, or if it's in our best interest. So I love this. And when I have worked on teams, I've asked and I have participated in what I call an adapted 360-degree assessment. So this assessment actually came from before I opened a private practice and I worked in for like Kaiser. I think I decided I wanted to be like a leadership coach or something. And so I adapted this guy. I'll find his name for you, but he's really brilliant with his coaching program. And he had this 360-degree assessment, not done in this way, but he had it where you just take the questions instead of having it be super expensive where no one would do it because it's cost prohibitive, where these questions could be sent out to people up, down, and across. And then feedback is like anonymized and what's it called? Aggregated and then presented to the person. I think just sit down and ask people directly and get feedback from them. So that's what I would suggest. And if I had it my way, everyone at Antioch would do this, including faculty and everyone and the students. So these are things if you want to do it with your peers or if your instructors are willing, I think that this is super helpful. Like, what are up to 3 things I do well? What is one thing I can do better that would have the biggest impact on my performance as a therapist? Maybe we could reword that one. What other advice do you have for me to help me improve? And if people can give feedback and if you can receive it, great. It's also good for peers, like to be able to tell each other the second and third one, because I think people have a lot easier time with the first one to be able to say, actually, so and so, here's what I think constructively would be helpful for you. Um, okay, so now let's talk about where to look for jobs. So there is a hidden job market, which is called networking, where you hear about jobs that you get connected to someone who has an opening or is looking for an associate or whatever it is or something else. There are websites you can reach out. I'm going to talk about some of these. There are recruiters. I put one in a recent Chronicles. So scavenger hunt, there's a recruiter's name and information in there if anyone wants to go back and find it. And then there's like trainings too. When you go to trainings, you meet people. So the quality of your relationships, how you show up in these settings matter. So following up also after interviews is important. So if you don't meet all the criteria, you can also apply because sometimes people are like, oh, I actually have this other job that's not posted. Would you be interested in that? So there's different reasons, like different things that can come up, but putting yourself out there, it can't happen if you don't do that. Okay, so we have a couple options depending on what your style is. So there's no right or wrong way to network. I happen to love having like lots of people over to my office, so I don't have to go anywhere, but I also like being around the energy. I have some of my best friends, like actually we were at a conference once and one of my friends got so overstimulated that we came back and we were hanging out in one of the rooms and he climbed on top of a dresser to get away from everyone because he just could not handle the level of like overstimulation that was happening. And we were like, what are you doing? He's like, I just need a break. And we're like, okay, you could just tell us to like go outside and we'll come back anyway. So people have different needs. That's okay. Okay. So if you are a person who doesn't like being in person around a lot of people, going on, like, I know I'm aging myself here because like Facebook actually is my comfort zone. But Facebook groups, there's so many mental health professional groups on Facebook where people are asking for referrals or saying that they want to like do a one-on-one Zoom with people and get to know each other. Usually people would prefer to refer to people where they actually know you as a clinician because then they can give a better recommendation to the client. So the more people know how you work and who you are and what your values are, the better. So if you're on Facebook and you're also posting other things that are like resources or reading resources, Um, and being professional, people will see you. That's visibility, and you don't talk to anyone. If you don't want to do that, you can like news your own newsletter. Like there's so many programs for that, or your website. You can put blogs. You can like submit to different places. If you're comfortable being on a podcast, there's things like that. Reaching out. One of the people in my practice, like they hate like the big events, but they're happy to do like a Zoom or a phone call. And so you can also do that, get to know people. Going to webinars, getting on mailing lists, things like that. There's a lot of things that you can do to be connected without having to go out and have like a whole overstimulating experience, if that's not your thing. If you like that, there's lots of conferences that are so fun to go to because you go to the conference all day, you walk by all the exhibit booths, you give everyone your business card. Hopefully, you have meaningful conversations. And then you get to go out to dinners at night and like it's like kind of exhausting at a certain point, but like all day you're with people if that's your thing. Also going to trainings that are in person, same thing. Like that's like kind of like an in between where it's structured. You're sitting there, you can talk to people, you can get to know people by their questions or by like the little time in between the formal activity. But then you might meet someone who aligns with you, that they're in a different place in California, and you have come across a client who needs an in-person therapist there, and now you have them to refer to, and they have you. There's a lot of local networking events. I'm having one that I can tell you all about if you want. If you want that, in on the 23rd, right, Lindsay? And then Lindsay helped with that. Networking groups. There's different specific like Los Angeles. I forgot what it's called. Los Angeles Eating Disorder something collective. I think like there's SoCal OCD or OCD SoCal. There's different groups or organizations developed around specific diagnosis or other specifics in mental health that you could join. You could be a speaker if that's something that you want to do. Having your own events, or just different things like that. Following up after meetings. Having coffee chats, like where you each have coffee on Zoom. I think I already said that. Or being in supervision and consultation groups. So there's just so many different opportunities for building your network. I think I put in one of our resources that I'm going to share with you. You could reach out to people like on Psychology Today and say, oh, I'm interested in the work that you do around whatever this specific thing is. Do you have 15 minutes to go on Zoom? And maybe they will. And then maybe they like love that you care and that you wanted to know about the specific population, and they can tell you about trainings, or they can tell you someone else who you can connect with to learn even more. Or if you're looking for a job, someone they know who might have a job opening. So the next thing is, when you're looking for a job, is we're looking at the work environment. Okay. So you've learned some things from the careers you've already had, right? Like, or the jobs you've already had up until now, because I know everybody has done something. Also your clinical training environment. What do you like? What feels good? What's hard? So you'll get to bring all of that when you're looking into this next step. So when you're interviewing, you can ask them about their values. You can ask them about their turnover. You can also look on Glassdoor to get some of that information. I think it's more helpful to know if you know anyone who works there and see what they say, because that's probably going to be more accurate. How do they handle conflicts and disagreements? I mean, I've worked at places that were super conflict avoidant, and that never goes well. We have to be able to talk about things. And so if the leadership is conflict avoidant, it trickles down. So we want to know, like, what happens? Like, do people get triangulated? Can people tell each other how they feel, and it's okay and it gets worked out? Like, what happens? Who's involved in decisions? Is management making it from over here without having any connection down here? That happens. Is it collaborative? Do they take the consideration of the people who are actually doing the work? And of course, I'm sounding a way that I wouldn't say this in an interview. I would say it in way more curious of a way, which I can reframe if it's helpful when we get to the Q&A part. But yeah, asking like, how do they view treatment? How do they view the clients? I've worked in places, if you've been in my DBT class, you've heard me say this, where people sit in a room and say things about a client that are heartbreaking because people coming in for help, and I think that if we're going to say something about a client, I do believe we should be able to say it to the client. And if I wouldn't say it to the client, maybe I need to think about what I'm saying about them. Right. So like there's ways of asking like, oh, what's your philosophy on treatment? Like, what do you believe promotes healing? Um, Tell me like, oh, who are the people in leadership positions? How did they get those jobs? If you see that there's a pattern of like promoting from within, that's good, right? Like we want to see things like that. Or if there's other questions you all have, like when we get to discussion, would love to hear them. Okay, so pay transparency. So in California, there is a law now where pay has to be posted. I forgot the size of the company, but if it's most companies, like pay has to be posted. So you shouldn't have to tell an employer what you're asking for. It is actually legally okay for you to say, actually, what's the range? Like, what is the salary range or the range compensation range for this position? They have to tell you. So there's that, which is new, but I think it's great. You can compare if you go on LinkedIn, like you can compare like different roles or on Indeed now that there's pay transparency, like what is the job? What are they paying? The pay isn't the only factor though, because benefits can vary widely. Like for example, Kaiser has amazing benefits. Most treatment centers don't. And there's like tens of thousands of dollars different in like total compensation with benefit differences. So just keep that in mind. Um, yeah, like also paying attention to what is the offer process like. If someone says, I'm sending you an offer right now, here it is, you have 1 hour to get back to me. Okay, noted, right? Do I want to work there? I don't know. Like, so I think like there's something about a reasonable process in general. Like we have to, obviously be mindful of the employer, but having something within reason as an employee is important. So definitely get outside feedback. So before you say yes, please check with people. If anyone you know or anyone you know knows someone who might be able to give you information. Some people are going to have really positive experiences of the same place that someone else has a really negative experience. So it's just, the more that you can kind of contextualize things, you still might end up in places that either you're like really happy or really not. And then hopefully you can learn from each experience. So some of these other things are who owns the company. I have never in my life believed more in that. This is not always possible, but it's very different if a clinician owns a company or has some level of autonomy, which they technically should legally in California. But it's very different when it's clinically driven versus business driven, and those things can be very much in conflict. So I can tell you stories about that another day. So there's a lot of private equity and venture capital coming in. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that I've worked the first program I worked for got acquired while I was there. It did not go well. The program is now closed after a long time. So they think that they know, and they come in and there's like profit driven decisions, and they don't necessarily they don't lead to good outcomes. But not every. I want to hold hope that not every experience is like that. I personally haven't seen it be different yet in the long run. What is their mission? That's important. So just like noticing some of these things I have here, is it clear? Do they have an org chart? Could they show you what it is? Do you know who your boss is? Do you know what the job description is? Do they have one? These are things that are good to know. What are their billing practices? You may or may not know. Is there training or supervision? What's that like? Yeah, who's providing clinical supervision? Is it treatment team? Because we don't want that. We want actual supervision that's not treatment team, which we can talk about. Yeah, so those are things to maybe pay attention to. So, here's the laws that you can look at for pay transparency if you're interested. So it says over 15 employees. Here's some examples that I pulled. This is from a while ago, like from February, from I think LinkedIn maybe. But yeah, just comparing is helpful. I mean, this is huge, this range, so I don't know why that would be hard to know what you'd be getting. And then I have resources that you can link to for trainings, for like Facebook groups, for our job board that's growing if you're interested. Yay. And I did actually the time I was going for. So yeah, so there's lots of different ways to get to where you're going and being open and like just embracing every moment, every experience as best you can. It can all be meaningful. You will still get wherever it is, and not knowing can be more exciting or actually better in the long run. I wanted to be a chief operating officer before the pandemic. I'm so glad that was not something I stuck to. I would be miserable. That was the goal. I'm so glad I didn't do that. My life is like the best I could ever dream of now with everything. So just to put that out there, um, having like network, like your community people, I didn't say this part yet, but this is when we all talk. Hopefully you can build this with each other. I will say it a million times. Having your people who are safe that you can say, I don't know if I messed up. This just happened. I'm fragile. Help me with the parts I did well. And then I need to hear the parts where I could have done better. Having the people where you can say that and they're not going to say, oh, so and so, do you know what whoever did in session? Like find your safe people because we need to be able to have those conversations. So, whatever you do, have your career somehow fit in your life, right? We want it to all match. And then your inner gauge, whatever that is for you, will tell you like, how does it feel to be in this environment? Is it a fit? Notice it, obviously, make decisions from a thoughtful place. Maybe there's things that can be discussed. You don't have to change everything, but just like, the more that we do our own work, the more we're connected to ourselves and our values, the more we can make mindful choices. All right, so I'm going to stop talking.